Hello, good morning, good evening, good day to you, whatever time it is. Welcome to our joint webinar between WIPO and IPPI on the topic of green tech and digital IP, creating the green technology revolution. My name is Pat Breslin, and I am the vice chair of AIPPI's Standing Committee on IP and Green Technology. Our committee has joined with the Standing Committee on the Digital Economy to do this presentation, and importantly, it's co-presented with WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, and we have some of their leadership from WIPO Green, which is specific to green technology. I'm going to introduce you all to our panel in just one moment. First, I need to do a little bit of housekeeping. With regard to how our format will work, we're going to have 30 minutes of presentations and then a full 60 minutes of roundtable discussion. And the audience questions are very welcome for that. To submit a question to the panelists, use the Q&A box in Zoom, which we've illustrated here so that it's familiar. And if you have technical problems, please send a message in the chat box and we'll try to solve that. So we have an esteemed group of panelists for our presentation today. Let me introduce them by first name, because we'll be speaking to each other on a first name basis, but they will each tell you their full name and what they do and a little bit about themselves. I'm going to begin first with Anja van der Roop from WIPO. Anja, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. And thanks also to AIPPI for organizing all that. My name is Anja van der Roop. I work as a senior program coordinator for WIPO Green in the World Intellectual Property Organization. Looking forward to our webinar. Thanks.
Thanks, Anja. And Yuki-san, I'd like you to introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll learn more in your presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yuki. I'm director of the multilateral policy affairs at the Japan Patent Office. I work on cooperative initiatives for World Intellectual Property Organization, or WIPO. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuki. And Cynthia, why don't you tell us a little about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Pat. Hello, everyone. My name is Cynthia Kennedy. I am one of the founders of IP Seva, which is an international network of IP specialists who are particularly interested in collaboration on green technology. We're interested in climate change and how we can contribute to solutions from our IP discipline. And I was at WIPO for 7 years as a director of a division there. I'm just delighted and honored to be with this distinguished group today. Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. Glad to have you as well. And you as well, Jan. Could you introduce yourself?
Sure. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Jan Menier. I'm the Chief Economist of the European Patent Office, where I follow, among others, green technologies. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks to having me, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Jan. So I'll go over to Dr. Diego Boschetti Muskov. Please introduce yourself and what you do.
Hello, everyone. My name is Diego Muskov. I'm the Deputy Head of the Special Patent Affairs in the National Institute of Intellectual Property from Brazil. And I also the manager of the task force of Fast Track in INPI. And so I deal with the fast tracks from green patent and other fast tracks like PPH and so on. And thank you very much, WIPO and AIPPA, for the invitation to be here. And I'm looking forward to hear about discuss with you about the green technology.
Thank you, Diego. And Santanu, please tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Shantanu Dashgupta. I work for a company called Reliance Industries in India. And what I do is basically, I run an R&D at Reliance Industries with a focus on synthetic biology, but the main focus is on green technology. And I'm really glad to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to have you as well. And Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Pat. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Kevin Shipley. Today, I'm here in my capacity as the chair for the Standing Committee on Digital Economy at AIPPI, and we're happy to co-moderate and co-host this webinar with Pat's committee and with our partners at WIPO. I am a lawyer in private practice in Canada, focusing on patents and new technologies. So we're looking forward to a great panel and a great discussion today.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Glad to team up with you as well. As I said, our format will include some presentation slides from 3 of our speakers, beginning with Anya, who she already explained her title, but she'll tell you more about what she is doing in the WIPO GREEN area dealing with climate change and food security. So Anya, do you want to start us off with your presentation?
With pleasure. So I want to start by introducing the topic about where green tech and digital economy converge, but then also introduce what we're doing at WIPO with the WIPO GREEN initiative. So if we can go to the first slide, and just a few thoughts on what is, so to say, green information and communication technology. And I think there are 2 aspects to it. One is the greening of ICT as such, and in a strict sense, sort of green ICT is the use of technologies and techniques to either lower carbon consumption or the carbon footprint or the ICT function. So it's basically making information and communication technologies greener. But the other aspect to it, which I think is equally important, is if we talk about efficiencies beyond ICT. So green ICT also addresses the use of ICT as an enabling technology to help reduce power consumption outside of the ICT function. And as such, it could deliver strategic CO2 reductions in certain areas, for instance, in the framework of smart cities or intelligent transport. So again, ICT as a set of technology has the potential to make a contribution to achieving certain broader goals. If we look at the sector right now, the carbon footprint of ICT doesn't seem to be particularly relevant or significant, as it makes up less than 2% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. However, we are already seeing and expecting an increasing digitalization. So also there's been estimates that the footprint is expected to grow to account for as much as 14% of global emissions by 2040. So the need of greening ICT, but also for ICT to make a contribution to other areas is there. Can we go to the next slide, please? That slide shows the results of a report that the World Economic Forum does on a yearly basis, where they ask global leaders to assess the global risk landscape, both in terms of impact, but also in terms of likelihood. And what we've seen over the last years is increasing importance, both in terms of impact, but also in terms of likelihood of environmental risks. You can see that in green on that slide. So high up, I mean, obviously highest up, and that is new, as you all know, is infectious diseases with the pandemic that we're facing. But apart from that, the highest in terms of impact both and likelihood is climate action failure, but then also biodiversity loss, natural resource crisis, and extreme weather events. But one thing that I also want to highlight here is the technological risks, which are in purple. And this increasing digitalization that I mentioned can also, well, apart from the greenhouse gas emissions, but can also cause other problems, which is a digital power concentration, but also a digital inequality. So these are also things that we have to keep an eye on. So if we go to the next slide, we see, I mean, you all know these, but is what the global policy framework looks like and what the UN has set to achieve in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm showing this both to say that not only in terms of the risks, but also in terms of what we want to achieve, has many goals have an environmental component, but also because, well, we all want to breathe fresh air and drink fresh water and have access to energy, but also many of these development goals have a technology angle. And this is also where IP and innovation come into place, because they don't exist as ends in themselves, but in order to achieve certain policy goals. Where we come in is the Partnership for Goals with our initiative. So if we go to the next slide, we have created WIPO GREEN, an online platform for accelerated adaptation, adoption, and deployment of green technologies. And it does that by connecting those who provide technology, green technology, with those who are looking for environmentally sustainable solutions. And in that way, we enable adaptation and deployment of green technologies through a transparent marketplace. So it makes it easier to find the providers of certain technologies. And we engage with the private sector, and as such contribute to the global policy dialogue and to the global goals that I've just shown before. Next slide, please. Just some highlights from last year's review. We've had more than 100,000 unique page views, which doubled from the year before. So the platform is expanding. There's a regular communication through a newsletter, which reaches more than 7,000 subscribers. Last year, we've had 3,750 technologies, needs, and experts, but also that number has grown meanwhile. And this led to more than 700 connections. And we've had more than 50 news items published, but I'll explain in more detail how that comes into play. So if we go to the next slide, one element of what we're doing of WIPO GREEN is the network of partners. We have more than 120 partners now, which come from, they're shown in orange, come from the different continents, but they also have different expertise, both in terms of the geographic reach, but also in terms of the technology sectors and in terms of the where they're placed in the innovation chain. And by bringing them all together, the idea is to leverage their expertise to achieve our common goals, which is innovation and fostering the dissemination of green technologies. So if we go to the next slide, we see a bit more. The second pillar is the database, where you can either find technology offers, or you can find what we call needs, is the description of search for a certain technology, a product, a process, know-how, collaboration or finance. And you also find hundreds of experts in our experts database with different sets of expertise. The other pillar is the matchmaking projects. where that are used to work in a certain geographic region and on a specific technology, and whereby we identify the demand on the ground for certain technologies, and then map what available solutions exist both in the region and beyond. And we've done approximately one a year since 2015. So if we go to the next slide, I'm coming to the most recent one, which is a project in Indonesia about their cause of, again, greenhouse gas emissions. And again, the idea is to work with the mills in Indonesia and to see their willingness to adopt certain technological solutions to tackle this problem. And the idea available and to make those connections and link to the different stakeholders that would be important to take those projects forward. Next slide, please. So coming a bit more in detail with regard to the database, one of the questions also frequently, what are green technologies, that we've also discussed with Jan recently. The way we have split this up is that we have identified certain sectors, which is energy, pollution and waste, farming and forestry, products and materials, building and construction, transportation and water. And the idea is that you identify one of the sectors where your technology would fit in as a provider, and then you also describe the environmental benefits when you showcase your technology. And so the biggest sort of bulk of available technologies is in the area of energy at this stage. The next slide, please. Coming to, again, information and communication technologies in the database, there's no subcategory as such, which covers green ICT. But you can find these solutions, as you can already imagine, in different categories on the database. So there's ICT in energy and energy management. There's measuring and monitoring greenhouse gases. There's pollution detection, measurement and monitoring. There's ICT in pollution and waste management, ICT in farming, GIS and earth observation, in hazard prevention and early warning systems, in their new ICT-based transport solutions, and there's ICT in buildings, urban development, management and planning, and then also in water reserves assessment, monitoring and control. So for instance, to detect leakages in the water distribution systems. And that's also true for energy. So just to give you an overview of the possible fields where this could apply. If we go to the next slide, just want to highlight again what the benefits there are of uploading either your technologies or describing your needs, is that you receive free of charge international promotion, because we frequently talk also about the technologies in our database and group them according to different themes and showcase examples. But then you're also taken into consideration for matchmaking activities that we carry out. You're able to connect with the large network of green technologies providers and experts. You can identify potential collaborators, investors, and licensees, and you're able to participate in WIPO Green activities, such as matchmaking activities, events, exhibitions, partner events, and you get a discount on WIPO arbitration and mediation services. Next slide, please. So if you want to participate, you can either register as a user and check out the full details of the technologies and needs that are available on the website. And then you can, after registration, contact others and submit your technology you need, or you can join as a partner if you want to engage in more depth and work with us on events, publications, or initiatives. And to do that, you have to send us a letter with the proposed contribution and the acceptance of the charter. And that's already the introduction from my side. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion. Thank you. I think
Thank you very much, Anya.
there's a closing slide, but no, never mind.
Thank you for sharing that, Anya. It's a pleasure to be partnering with you on this webinar and learning more about WIPO Green and these interesting initiatives, which I see expanding. And I'm sure there'll be some questions for you, but I think what we'll do now is have Yuki-san give us a perspective on WIPO Green from Japan. He has some good knowledge of that in his role as a director at the Japan Patent Office. And we're interested in how well Japan reflects almost a model of a patent authority collaborating with WIPO Green. So Yuki-san, would love to hear your presentation, and feel free to share that with us all.
Thank you very much, Pat-san, for your very kind introduction. My name is Shimizu Yuki again. I'd like to speak about the entitled to this presentation, expectation for the future of the WIPO Green, and introduce some activities from the Japanese community. And as Anya-san has already made an excellent presentation, I'd like to, I don't repeat the detailed explanation about the WIPO Green, but I'd like to mention one thing that the first one, this WIPO Green was set up based on a proposal by the Japan Intellectual Property Association, JIPA. So this is the Japanese community contributed to the start of the WIPO Green. And Japan has been greatly contributing to the development of WIPO Green. I will talk about some of the achievements. Currently, Japan is ranked #1 in terms of the number of users, which shows how active users in Japan are in using the platform. As Anya-san mentioned, more than 100 organizations around the world are participating in WIPO Green as partners. And from Japan, 30 organizations are supporting the activities of WIPO Green as partners, which is the largest number in the world. Also, Japan is ranked #2 in the world, following to the United States, in terms of the number of registered technologies in the WIPO Green database. And the third point, in Japan, many organizations are supporting WIPO Green. The WIPO Japan office is responsible for actively working as a bridge between all users of WIPO services in Japan and the WIPO headquarters. It also provides information on and provides consultations on WIPO Green. Also, the JIPA and the Japan Patent Attorneys Association are supporting their members in terms of providing information on and raising awareness on the importance of WIPO Green. Japan Institute for Promoting Invention and Innovation is conducting awareness campaign mainly to SMEs and universities. The JPO is supporting the basic concept of WIPO Green and became a partner in February 2020, becoming the first partners from an IP office in the Asian and the Pacific region. I'd like to talk about expectations for the future of the WIPO Green. I believe that we can make WIPO Green even more effective. For example, to further develop this platform, it is important to increase the number of users who wish to use WIPO Green. This will be possible through creating and disseminating many commercially applicable success stories. In addition to encourage matching, it is also important to show the specialized technical information registered in the WIPO GREEN database in an easy to understand way that gives practical examples so that even non-technical personnel can understand. The number of technological needs registered in the WIPO GREEN database must be increased. Although the number of registered environmental technologies in the database exceeds more than 6,500, the number of registered needs for using environmental technologies is less than 300. In working to solve environmental issues by using intellectual properties, the JPO is committed to work in collaboration with all stakeholders, such as WIPO and the industrial sector. Patent offices have close local networks with IP stakeholders, as well as wealth of IP information. JPO hopes that more IP offices will participate in the WIPO GREEN network and serve as information sources. The wider use of WIPO GREEN by SMEs and research institutes is also important. At present, Japan's public organizations, such as Japan External Trade Organization and the SME Support Japan, are providing various matching services to transfer technologies. As a means to solve various issues in developing sales channels and expanding businesses, we hope that SMEs and research institutes will use WIPO GREEN in addition to other existing services. To encourage more technology transfers, it is essential to make effective use of local networks. When technologies are transferred in Japan, various organizations such as local governments, financial institutions, and technology licensing organizations help with the transfers. I hope these organizations will get involved in WIPO GREEN activities. Mr. Darren Tan, Director General of WIPO, has voiced an opinion that to promote innovations, participation of not only IP experts, but also a wide range of stakeholders is required. I believe that this is also the case with the activities of WIPO GREEN. I hope that other organizations that are not mainly involved with IP, such as other UN agencies, relevant ministries and agencies, and non-governmental organizations will participate in the activities of WIPO GREEN. JPO and JIPA, supported by WIPO, will hold two international symposiums shortly. On June 17th, JIPA will start streaming a video of the International Symposium on Green Technologies that focuses on green oceans. This symposium is an initiative to create and disseminate best practices of WIPO GREEN. On June 18th, JPO will hold a symposium on further development of WIPO GREEN. Please look at JPO's website for further information and registration. The JPO has expanded the WIPO GREEN network in Japan together with the WIPO Japan office. In addition, the government of Japan also assists WIPO's activities by making voluntary contributions. For example, an acceleration project underway in South America is financed by the government of Japan. Also last year, the JPO launched a web page showing activities conducted by Japanese partners of WIPO GREEN. Going forward, the JPO, in cooperation with the WIPO and WIPO GREEN partners, is committed to supporting the activities of WIPO GREEN and working to advance environmental technologies. I'm looking forward to more people's support for the purpose of WIPO GREEN, so as to facilitate the growth of environmental technologies. Also, I hope that more international collaborations will be made possible based on environmental technology transfers, and anticipate IP will contribute to achieving the SDGs. I'm looking forward to today's discussion with distinguished moderator and panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yuki-san. That was very interesting. And I think your presentation illustrates a lot of momentum and also touches on a key issue, which is the relationship between Japanese companies and stakeholders and those in South America, and these global connections that WIPO GREEN is well positioned to assist. So thank you for those examples, and we'll talk about more. But next, we're going to have Jan Menier discuss a perspective from the European Patent Office. And also, being an economist myself, I enjoy these slides. They have a lot of interesting data that will answer a number of questions that I think some of you in the audience would have. So Jan, now to you.
Thank you, Pat. So indeed, I'd like to use my slot to share a few insights from a study that we recently published with the International Energy Agency on the topic of patents and their energy transition. So you may ask why the IEA and the EPO, why such a collaboration? Well, as you certainly know, the International Energy Agency is in charge of monitoring the energy transition and is in particular developing economic scenarios for this transition towards 2050 or 2070 in order to figure out how we can reach net zero carbon emissions. And the matter of the fact, a key finding of all their scenarios is that it's not possible without innovation. It's not possible without new technology. And perhaps the best way to illustrate this is this chart that shows that about more than a third of the technologies that are needed to shift to net zero by 2070 are still at the prototype or demonstration stage. And in fact, if we want to go faster, if we want to reach net zero by 2050, it's 50% of the technologies that are still at the prototype or demonstration stage. So innovation in technology matters a lot for the energy transition. It matters a lot for the IEA to guide policy making. And this is why it was interesting for them to work with us to map actually the technologies from their scenarios to the patent data in order to be able to monitor innovation in that space. So I cannot share all the results, but let me highlight a few key findings, and perhaps this one first. So on this chart, you have the trends since 2000, base 100, of patenting in low carbon energy technologies in dark gray versus fossil fuel technologies in light blue. And what we measure is the international patent families worldwide. So we aim to count the inventions, in fact, the valuable inventions that are patented internationally. And there's a good and the bad news in that chart. Starting with the bad news, you see that actually innovation in patenting in low carbon energy has been increasing very fast during the first decade of this millennium. Plus 12.5% growth every year on average until 2013. That's really fast, much faster than in other technology fields. But this stopped in 2014, and the growth that resumed afterwards is slower, significantly slower, plus 3.3% per year on average. And this is not sufficient. This is not fast enough to reach the scenarios, the policy scenarios of the IEA. So more investment, faster innovation in low carbon energy is needed. So that's rather the bad news or not so good news.
In the vein of mixed news, Jan, just we're getting comment that people viewing the slides right now are seeing the presenter mode, the two
presenter
screens.
mode. Okay. So when testing it, it was
switch there.
This one, right?
I think so.
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry for this.
There you go. That looks better. Now we can focus on the slide and see it in full high definition, get the full effect.
Perfect. Thanks. And so the other takeaway from this slide is that we also see a decline since 2015 of patenting activities related to fossil fuel technology. And this is quite a significant inflection because what we show in the study, it's the first time we observe that since World War II. So it's really potentially an important shift. And actually, so we have to see in the coming year whether it's confirmed, but it can be a signal of a shift, at least of the innovation side of the economy from fossil fuel to cleaner sources of energy. So that's aggregated figures, and perhaps another way to look at it is to disaggregate and to try to make sense of what is happening behind. And to do this, we decomposed low carbon energy technologies in 3 categories. In the supply side, in light blue here, so green energy generation, including nuclear, because it's decarbonized and we have the carbon focus. Then you have the demand side, so it's energy efficiency and fuel switching on the demand side across the economy, all sectors concerned. And finally, you have another categories of cross-cutting enabling technology. I will come back to that. And what you see is that the fast growth from 2000 to 2012 has been in fact fueled by 2 things. Fast growth, a lot of innovation in energy efficiency on the demand side. This is actually the bulk of low carbon inventions, 60%, stable over time. And also the fast rise of innovation in renewables, in particular in solar and wind. So this was the growth regime until 2012. And clearly we see that in the recent years, it's not the growth regime anymore. Actually, the patenting related to renewable energy is declining. This is not necessarily bad news. It means that these technologies have become mature. We all know that solar PV are cheaper than ever. They are deployed massively. They are mature. There is not so much innovation there anymore, at least at the scientific level. And we also see a plateau in innovation in end use. And what is actually driving the growth, what is the real frontier of innovation now for low carbon energy, is this category of cross-cutting enabling technologies like batteries, any types of electricity storage, smart grids, hydrogen or carbon capture and usage that can be deployed in all sectors, and that enables the better integration of renewable energy in the economic system. And that also drive the shift of entire sectors to cleaner energy sources. The best example we have being electric vehicles. It's the most advanced example so far. And the challenge is for other sectors like steel, for instance, or cement to also shift away from fossil fuel. And this requires a lot of innovation. So let me finish the presentation with just a couple of examples. So I mentioned the electric vehicles. Actually, we see that in patent data that the shift away from fossil fuel to electric could be detected already as of 2010, 2011. Since 2011, there is more patenting related to electric vehicles than to more efficient fuel engine vehicles. And this patenting of this innovation around electric vehicles does not only include the batteries or fuel cells, but also the propulsion and the charging infrastructure, which has a lot of digital technologies. Is very much related to smart grids, and so has potential for technology spillovers to the other sectors. And this is a really an important feature of these enabling technologies, and in particular of digital. I'll finish with the example of solar. So I said perhaps a bit too quickly that innovation is done in solar. It's not fully true, it's declining. And in fact, even more interesting than the decline is the shift of the focus of R&D in solar to new fields. Actually, there is hardly any patenting related to the dominant technology for PV cells today. And the focus has shifted to organic PV cells, which are not yet in the market or just starting, and have completely new properties, new potential. And in particular, they can make a lot of small connected, smart connected object autonomous energy-wise. And so they have huge potential for the IoT. Another interesting finding is that while innovation in panels and cells has decreased in general, there is more and more innovation in the installation, so in the deployment of these technologies. And again, we see digital technologies there because it's mainly focused on, it's largely focused on smart installation, typically with using artificial intelligence for tracking the sun and having movable panels that can follow the sun to make it short. So I will finish here. I thank you for your attention, and of course, I'm happy to discuss and invite you to consider the study if you are interested in further results. Thank you.
Jan, thank you very much for that presentation. As I said, I love to see the data, and I think you tied back into both Yuki-san and Anya's presentations as well. especially on these cross-cutting areas like any smart grid or smart car or anything in the IoT sphere is often thought of as a digital or part of the digital economy. But these are really key enabling technologies for greening energy consumption, energy use, and production, because you have the solar example, which is an AI-driven example of more efficient solar. So thank you for bringing that to our conversation. I wanted to see if an area that both Yuki-san and you touched on, and maybe either of you could talk about, is whether your data reveals what you, or do you have an idea as an economist where the funding sources would be for these types of innovations? I think you're on mute, Jan.
Sure. Yes, I was trying to juggle with the two screens. And thanks. So actually, the funding is a challenge. So as we see, so there is a need to invest in new technology. It's long term, and it's to a large extent a new breed of technology venture, especially in Europe, I would say. Perhaps the United States, in particular, are more advanced or experienced in that respect. So we see that there is quite a significant share of these patents that come from public research institutions and universities, about 9%. It's increasing over time. So a lot of this technology potential is very upstream. There's a need to push it to the market. There's a need to invest. There are also many startups, and that's deep tech. So there's a market risk, there's a technology risk. So it's more risky than biotech with respect to the market risk, and more risky than digital with respect to the tech risk. So this needs a special breed of venture capital, of investors. We need to build the ecosystems for that. There's a need for public money, but also for private money to be funneled there. And there are not so many experienced funds in that respect, especially in Europe, perhaps more in the US. So the European Commission typically has identified the issue and is taking action in that direction, but that remains a big challenge to be addressed. And just to give one example of what you said about digital and the huge potential for energy saving with digital, there is one example of a fund that is active in that field. In deep tech, it's energy, Breakthrough Energy, the Bill Gates Fund. And one of their companies is Turntide, a US startup that uses artificial intelligence to enhance the efficiency of electric motors. And electric motors are 50% of electricity consumption today. And the electricity efficiency saving, thanks to artificial intelligence, is about 60%. So this is the kind of gain that can be done with deep tech and digital technologies in that space.
Thank you for that response. I don't know, Yuki-san, if you have any thoughts on the perspective of funding green technology from a Japanese viewpoint. I know there are a lot of large companies participating in WIPO Green as stakeholders, but SMEs and smaller companies are also something you mentioned.
Thank you very much. I heard from the Japanese company that the starting the collaboration needs funds, but the getting funds is very difficult current now. So the companies themselves are seeking to getting some funds to start collaboration or the start pilot project. But currently, I do not have any solution to that program. Thank you.
Yes, funding is always a challenge. I think others might have some thoughts. I don't know, Cynthia, if you want to weigh in from your perspective, doing consulting work on special projects. How are these types of engagements and projects funded in your experience, if you have examples, or what you might envision as an ideal way that funding would be available for more use of green tech.
Thank you, Pat. Well, let me start by saying this is tremendously exciting. I really enjoyed hearing from Anya about WIPO Green. And as she said, IP is not kind of the end in and of itself, but it's a tool. And this is an example of people trying to use IP as a tool for something really important. So I applaud that. And then also, I'd like to express my admiration for the JPO. It's just, there's a long history of Japanese commitment to technology transfer and just the whole idea of getting technologies out and teaching people how to use IP and how to use technology. And that's what this is about. So I love that. I thought Jan Menier's presentation was really interesting too, because it's just so fascinating. These technologies are wonderful. That's why I do what I do. I love working with clients on these technologies, and you can really directly see how they're going to help the world. It's not like, you know, representing an insurance company or something. So I guess this question of funding gets to the question of what is the vision? What are we trying to accomplish here? And to me, the end point, I don't know if people agree with this, but the goal would be to have WIPO Green result in contracts, licensing, and collaboration agreements, joint development collaboration agreements throughout the world. And that's technology transfer in its best form. So I mean, when I was at WIPO, I spent a lot of time, I spent years really traveling around to developing countries and emerging countries and trying to understand how this might happen. And I guess what I would say is the funding part is a big problem. And I have an idea on that, but even more, I think the concept, we've got to move from this one-way idea of purchase and sale. You know, one party has the IP and the other party is supposed to buy it. It doesn't work well that way. That may be why there's not that many needs registered. It's more mutual. You know, in my practice in California, I don't have people who approach each other and say, I have something you're going to buy. And the other people say, oh yeah, I have something I want, you know, I want to buy. It's more collaborative. Both parties have something to offer. So you have researchers and scientists all over the world. You know, they're in India, they're in Brazil, they're in the Caribbean, they're in Jamaica, has a wonderful University of the West Indies. You've got technology savvy people in other parts of the world. So we got to move from this one-way idea to more mutuality. We also have to go from patent information to contracts. You know, patent information has been around for a long time and nobody buys it. I mean, it just doesn't work. Getting a copy of a patent doesn't help you actually implement the technology or jointly develop it. So when I was at WIPO, there was a whole lot of push on patent information, and it ended up being a lot of time and money spent on getting the databases together, and it was very unclear what was going to happen with it. I mean, patent information is necessary, but it's not the solution. So I'd say from patents to tech solutions. And then, so finally to the funding issue, I'm working on a project right now and I'm hoping there's going to be some funding. It's the same problem we have with my small tech clients in California. Green tech is not like developing an app. It takes money, it takes time. A waste to gas furnace takes a demonstration project, it takes a lot of hardware, it takes you know, a lot of people really, and it doesn't get proven in 6 months. That's true of solar innovation. It's true of a lot of green tech. Biotech has a similar problem. You've got a whole lot of money that has to get put in. So there's a need for public money. That's why in the United States, the Bayh-Dole Act and the whole infrastructure we have is rich with this investment in technology development at the R stage and then through the development stage. That's missing in developing countries by and large, unfortunately. So I think we have to go to the development banks, and they haven't really been brought into this. If development banks can help fund and support research and development in emerging economies and developing countries, and if we can encourage national governments to fund more, which has not been encouraged, unfortunately, by the industrialized countries. The idea that VCs will step in, I don't think is realistic. VCs don't even do that in California. They're not really active in a lot of the green tech space. They want a quick exit, and they don't tolerate, they tolerate risk, but only if there's a really clear kind of high potential exit. That's not true if you're talking about new materials, for example. So I guess that's my comment. Yeah.
So this idea of this collaboration, right, potentially across borders or across regions, and the true idea of a technology transfer between parties rather than sort of a strict buy-sell market is interesting. So I was wondering, Diego, perhaps you could see from your perspective, seeing filings coming in, but in particularly fast-track filings and those that are in the sort of green tech or accelerated channels. From the perspective of a government or industry sector like that in Brazil, can you maybe explain a little bit on kind of the trends you're seeing there in terms of partnerships, and whether the IMPI, sort of that balance, I guess, between incoming filings that come through your desk and to be fast-tracked, and whether those are resulting in partnerships with Brazilian entities, and is that balance changing between sort of incoming foreign activity and the collaboration with domestic Brazilian companies in that same space?
Okay, hello everyone again. So just before answering your question, please, I would like to make an amendment to Cynthia's speech, because I agree a lot with her. I mean, it's this kind of financial, and not the financial only itself. We have some issues we need to overcome, and probably some perspective we need to overcome to deal with to advance in the green technology. I mean, there is a research called Mariana Mazzucato. I don't know if everyone had heard about it. Yes. And she said that, I mean, we used to see the public space, I mean, the public sector as someone that is waiting, or just waiting for the market to work and then just pop up and solve some problems. But Mariana Mazzucato seen in a different way. She saw that all this digital revolution we have, this has a huge amount of public funding in the beginning. And then when it's, I mean, not solved, but have a very huge and good structure, then the private sector come in and solve and this is more problem. She shows that the internet come from the public sector, the Wi-Fi, most of this technology we use today come from the public sector. And I believe that the green technology itself must come, or should at least, would be easier if it come from the public sector itself to build this infrastructure, I mean a green infrastructure, and then the private sector could build their blocks over it in a much safer and covering the risks that they can deal with. And now answer your question. Yes, we have several. I mean, this is I can split this answer in two. Okay, I mean, 1/3 of the applications in Brazil are from Brazilians, and 2/3 are from the foreigners applicants. So the foreigners, this is a good and a bad point of view. Yes, the foreigners applicant that come from Brazil, it means that Brazil has a good market, I mean a large one, and they are good, they can file their patent, and they feel free to file their patent in Brazil. And because they probably think that will be worth, they will have revenue from their investments. But on the other hand, Brazilian itself, the institutions of science and technology and so on, they file a lot of academic paper, but very few patent applications. So if you see the academic paper, you see that Brazil has a large number of academic paper and very low level of patent applications in Brazil and abroad, mainly abroad. And I think we need to change a little bit this perspective. I mean, if we need to train our academic system or academic staff to think about also as patent, also about license, because if you bring money to academic, they will build more technology and they will bring more green technology probably in the future. So we need to change this point of view. This, how can I say this, mindset from our perspective. And most of them file first an academic paper and they try to file a patent, and what's happened, they lose their patent. So we need to bring more patents and bring more quality patents to Brazil, and to Brazilians itself. Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you, and thank you, Kevin, for that question. And you probably have more. I just want to quickly dovetail to Santanu, because when we talk about the funding and the stakeholders, Japan has been an example where large corporations, global corporations, are very involved specifically in WIPO Green. But you play a key role doing research, advanced research with hugely interesting green opportunities for a major global company in India. So could you talk a little bit about the funding and also maybe share examples of what you're seeing, if you have some?
Yeah. So thanks, Pat. As you rightly said, and as a big corporate, I mean, we have realized early enough that this is actually our responsibility. Okay, and to working on the green technology, it's not just to develop a technology, but this is our responsibility to the society and to the environment. And that exactly is the reason, if I get a chance later on, I'll tell a little bit the technology what we have established to make fuel and from renewable sources like algae. Yeah. In terms of funding, I probably I do not think the way the economist is saying. My scientist view would be, I think the funding is actually a secondary issue. What is important is what you really want to achieve. And as Cynthia was saying, that if you have that global collaboration where each of the stakeholders, starting from small startup companies to all other technology providers and the big companies, and each of these different pieces, they have a common goal for green technology, then I don't think funding would be much difficult. As there are corporates, there are other funding agencies. If we have a real collaborative mechanism to deliver something, I don't think funding is going to be that critical an issue, and that's the way I think.
And what about the roles in the your company obviously pays your salary and you do. Why don't you talk a little bit about your algae to oil project? Yeah. Not so much specifically just about funding, but maybe about other parties that you work with, that you collaborate with, because I think the big picture here is we need collaboration, and the stakeholders are more one major stakeholder.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I'll very, quickly, I'll, just go through both the things what you were saying. As I was saying that, as a corporate, as basically, we are an oil and gas refinery company, and we thought, it's our responsibility, and we understood the pressing need for a green technology for sustainable fuel quite some time back. And we chose algae for our green technology platform, as algae offers the maximum potential to exploit the most important chemical reaction of this earth, which is called photosynthesis, and provide the maximum possible biomass compared to any land-based crops. And our flagship program, what we call as algae to oil, this technology works on non-arable land. It takes only 100% seawater, no fresh water at all. Of course, sunlight and CO2 from our refinery. And we have recognized that this power of algae technology as the most promising, green technology solution, and develop, one of the world's largest end-to-end integrated pilot scale of facilities for biofuel production in India. And over the past 10 years, we have successfully demonstrated end-to-end value chain of cultivation of algae strains, harvesting and dewatering, which is a challenge when you grow algae for algae biomass, and converting it into the renewable crude bio oil. And it's a little technical, but I wanted to tell you this. This is very important for each of you to hear, that when you take the biomass and convert it into oil, the way the nature had done is under high pressure and temperature, right? But in millions of years. But what we have done using a technology called hydrothermal liquefaction, in a matter of minutes, you convert that biomass to oil. So that's our technology. Quickly coming back to the collaboration, developing such a complex globally pioneering technology like algae technology definitely requires the interplay of various disciplines and experts to work in parallel and then converge on the common goal for large-scale adoption and commercialization. And this was possible by working, Pat, you are right, in all directions to accelerate our development. We work to achieve this through two-pronged approach. On the one hand, we rapidly establish the end-to-end biofuel production process through an in-house development coupled with expertise build-up, of course. On the other hand, we had partnership and collaborations with multiple startups, academics, other technology experts all around the world, okay, including India, of course. And these had definitely helped us to take advantage of various state-of-the-art technologies at different places quickly and integrate each of those things and with our in-house competencies. And in summary, this is a perfect example of a cohesive development by various technologists and experts beyond institutional and geographical boundaries to deploy this most sustainable process for the society, for our environment, and of course, ultimately to the business. Yeah. Thanks, Pat, for asking.
Thank you. And Anya, I was going to see if we could just tie that back quickly. The issue of stakeholders, it seems WIPO Green is successful with patent authorities such as Japan. It looks like Brazil and others are aware of the issue that WIPO Green is solving. But patent authorities, large companies like in Japan or Reliance does things like this. Are there other types of stakeholders? Are IP attorneys an important stakeholder? Because this audience is about 400 of them. And what should people think about to help WIPO Green move its mission further? It seems like just participation is key. Are there other types of stakeholders or any special steps you recommend to work with the database and use it as a tool to all these other goals?
Yeah, I think that would be my first advice to use it. And I mean, I see that a bit as a funnel, because you can obviously go and look what's out there. You can register. Once you've registered, you can either contact others, so use that to facilitate collaboration. You can, after you've registered, you can showcase your technologies, and through that search again for partners who either for license, but it could be also for sale, it could be for finance. So that it's not something that I wanted to mention also. It's not about patents as such. I mean, the technologies that are showcased, they come in different levels of development. So some are mature products, and some are earlier stage. So in that sense, that's the level of the network and the database level. But then in terms of partners, and I think we have examples from all types here on the panel, which I'm really happy about. Yuki-san already showcased the both JPO's role in promotion and building the network in Japan, but then also the Japan Intellectual Property Association in sort of bringing in the bigger companies, and obviously our founding partner, but then also the Brazilian Patent Office, with whom we've worked closely on the acceleration project in Latin America on climate smart agriculture. And they've again played an important role in reaching out to the stakeholders on the ground and identifying what we call needs, which means that there are certain environmental problems that are to be solved. But then also in terms of the different stakeholders, there's the, as you say, the IP lawyers, which are also really important. Many of them have registered as experts on the database, but also we work with IP attorneys in different projects. Some of them provide pro bono advice, for instance. There's a system where you can ask for pro bono IP advice if you are an SME from a developing country that doesn't otherwise have the funds. But then also on publications and events that we're working on. And we currently have a project also to support SMEs in developing IP strategies. So as I said, wide range. I also saw, and I wanted to use that opportunity quickly to make another point in terms of, I already said that we look at the technology a bit more broadly than just patent information, just to make that clear for the audience, that you can either license a patent if that's what you want to do, but what we always encourage also for bigger companies is that you offer technologies rather than single patents, because obviously that's the most of the time what people are looking for. And also there was a question on the details of the agreements that are included. Maybe just also as a basic of the functioning, we don't publish any details of any agreements, because the agreements are made between the parties, in the sense that what we see our role is to bring people together and to connect and to suggest matches and to see where potentially there could be some joint interests, but we don't interfere in the agreements as such. And then also there was a question about registration and how that functions. So we don't, what we do is that we check the people who register, like seeing whether the information they provide makes sense, whether the websites exist, whether the email addresses exist, like a basic quality check. But we don't check what they upload afterwards. So that's the self-assessment of the users, but we guide them in through the forms that are available, how to present technology, how to present the problems that they face. So these are meant to guide people through the process. But it's very open and very, very low key. So encouraging wide participation.
Thank you, Anya. I do want to just ask Diego and also point out, we've talked a little bit about different PTO, patent authority incentives including Fast Track, which Diego, I understand you run this for INPI in Brazil. And it seems like that's one source of, I guess, qualifying patents that could go into WIPO Green, because if it's been fast tracked, whether that's in the UK or Canada or the US or Brazil, it seems that it should be meeting some type of assessment. And what else can you tell us about the fast tracking incentive and what you're seeing, who uses it, and maybe some example technology that comes through it?
Okay, thank you for the question. Just before answer again, I missed one part of the Kevin answer about cooperation. So just to explain, when it comes to academic paper, you see a lot of collaboration in academic paper from Brazilian institution of science. So you see it's possible to cooperate to develop green technology and other kind of technology. But when it comes to patent, the Brazilian applicants in patents are used to file the application by itself, I mean, all alone. And they are stuck to this buy and sell process. So I think this is other issue we can upgrade. I mean, we can change our mindset. And regarding the importance of the patent attorney in Brazil, it's important to say we have groups of patent attorneys, I mean, association, and they are constantly making agenda like this one to increase the awareness of the IP. So this is one thing that the associations from attorneys from Brazil can spread around the world to increase the importance of the IP awareness, not of the green patents, but most of them. And now coming from your question, yes, we have a fast track specific for green technology. Actually, this is not new. We bring from Japan. So Shimizu-san, thank you very much for this benchmarking we bring to Brazil. And this was a very important because this was a breakthrough in the Brazilian patent office. We used to have fast track in a very, very short way. I mean, very few people could have fast track, just like elderly people, or if you have some kind of counterfeit goods. And the green technology was the first breakthrough that changed a little bit this mind. After that, we come with a lot of other kinds of fast track. And this one for the green technology for sure is the best example or the best result we have both internally and to the society. In the beginning, we start with very few requests. Most of them were from old years. I mean, patent files a long time ago. But nowadays, we start to increase the number of very brand new technologies. So it means, and not it means, but we can say in somehow this is a clue we are spurring, as we are incentivizing the number of the development of green technology in Brazil. And most of I'm bringing some numbers here. We have something like 1,000 requests from green technology. Most of them are allowed, are granted as fast as green technology. So something like 90%. And 95% of them are Brazilians and exclusive Brazilians. As I said before, we don't have joint patents a lot. Most of them are just for the Brazilian. And the main fields are, besides the technology applied to environment itself, we have basic chemistry and other special machines. And most of them are related to agriculture. So we have a very focused group. It would be great if you could expand this to other technological fields and also make other collaborations. Now we have this problem with the forest, the Amazon forest, and so on. So talking about the digital economics, we could say we can use this technology to increase this or to evolve in this environment problem we are facing in Brazil.
Thank you very much for that, Diego. And you are prescient because you began to answer questions that came in from the audience by posing your own thoughts there. And So, but we do thank the audience for questions about the Brazilian program. I think we're getting quite good questions from the audience, and Kevin and I will start to look at those more closely.
Yeah.
Kevin, are there any that you
So
think
another one that maybe picks up on a couple of these themes is kind of a two-parter, but we'll put them together. So the idea of, patent information, and you're talking to a call, it's made up of patent offices and largely IP attorneys. So patents and formalized IP are near and dear to our heart, and everybody, I think, takes a collective gasp if somebody says they're going to go forward without taking steps to protect their IP rights in some kind of formal way. But that isn't necessarily the only way to achieve these things. And so a question from the audience, which is not unique just to this subject matter, but perhaps something that many of our panelists could have a quick, looking at the time, sort of a quick feedback in, is whether IP, and I take that to mean sort of formalized IP, like a patent filing or something like that, is more of a stumbling block in this whole ecosystem, particularly when trying to deal with, if we take Cynthia's model of trying to foster collaborations between parties rather than just a buy-sell market, is the presence of this sort of formal IP, say between a developed and a developing nation, or between a big company and a small company, more of a hindrance in the sort of deals that people are trying to get done, whether it's through the WIPO GREEN platform or through the direct sort of private deals, and sort of how the presence or absence of formalized IP fits into that deal structure. So maybe, Cynthia, you talked about trying to kind of arrange some deals between people and looking at that idea of collaboration rather than buy-sell. Perhaps you might have a couple of quick thoughts there, and then maybe Santanu, if you've got experience from your corporate perspective, and then we'll see what the offices have to say about feedback they get about the use of formalized IP in these arrangements versus the sort of contractual business collaboration tech transfer, not necessarily limited to just a patent.
I should respond, Kevin.
Sure. Maybe you can see your sort of thoughts on the ground. If you've had a deal that was blown up because a patent got in the way, or perhaps couldn't be finalized because there was no way to actually sort of enforce and curtail the rights that are being transferred or not, or just kind of more generally, I guess, in the discussions you're seeing, whether that's a prominent factor in facilitating or hindering collaboration.
I don't see IP as the problem. I think IP is actually a really good system in theory. It really makes a lot of sense, and it enables sharing. If you know what you own, then you can share. And there's a lot of misconceptions, for example, about compulsory licensing. Everyone has compulsory licensing, but it's much better to use voluntary licensing. I think the problem is more an inequality in the ecosystems around the world. You can't compare where I practice commercial law in California with, the IP system in a poor developing country. India is very different. India is rich, relatively, and so strong and doing so many things. But we have to realize that in many developing countries, even in Brazil or Mexico, which are large countries with a rich scientific history, a rich scientific culture, you don't really have the infrastructure set up. There aren't these science and technology SMEs. I know people keep talking about SMEs, but I just don't see them. And I've spent a lot of time looking at this question. So I think it's more a problem of trying to level the playing field in terms of the ecosystems, and then
Right.
People can share. It's not about the IP law. It's about the fact that, there's a big IP divide. Most, what percent, like 90% of the patents in the world, probably 95% of the patents in the world come from a few countries. So that's kind of the background problem. I think it's solvable with will. with
Sure.
political will, it's solvable. But it's,
Well, I think the IP
it's the
practitioners,
reality, you know.
yeah, I think the IP practitioners on the call will be glad to hear that IP is not the problem. We we can overcome. But Santanu, from your perspective, you talked about collaborating and trying to grow this technological project. I imagine not every piece of it is patented, and probably not in every country where it's relevant. And so, from your perspective, as maybe a technology haver looking for collaborators, how does this formalized structure play a role for you?
Yeah, no, very interesting question. And I was listening to Cynthia, and I kind of agree with our experience. But the way I think is, COVID has taught us the need of a sharing world. Okay, and I don't want to go into that debate. What I call is IP terrorism to IP democratization. Okay, so I think IP democratization is happening, and it's really a need today. But I'll take the example of our technology and the advantages of developing a technology in a particular geography, and then enable sharing of the technology for the users at other parts of the world. So if a technology can be developed in a specific geography, taking the advantage of the resources and the skill sets, which is specific to that geography, but making it available to the rest of the world to practice. Now, different geographies should have this complementing nexus, across the globe. If you take the example of like our algae to oil technology, India offers one of the best environment for algae to grow. So thereby it provides an advantage to establish algae technology, especially for cultivating algae. Now the users from other countries can use these learnings to establish the technology in their geography and advance it further with the innovation more suited there, more suited or available, which probably was not there with us. So I think that kind of nexus is really, really important today. And before I end, I would also tell that why still holding an IP is going to be important. Now, if I want to talk to some technology partners as my collaborator or partner, then how do I recognize those people? I would recognize their excellence through the intellectual property they have gathered over the years. So with that, I'll end here. So thanks.
Well, I do want to thank the audience for great questions and thank the panelists for either being great multitaskers at reading some of them or telepathic and answering questions that were actually posed, but you really hit on some good points from one of our guests or one of our attendees. And this kind of reminds me, and I don't know if Jan has a thought on this, but technology transfer and collaboration, what make that happen is similar to the analysis of why we should have international trade. I mean, you can grow algae in large scale in India, but you cannot grow it where that fuel might be consumed later. That might be way up in the northern hemisphere. And you can't grow bananas in Sweden. You probably want to trade reindeer or other great things, Swedish beer and crystal, but you're not going to, not everybody brings the same thing to the table. And trade happens in general because not everybody has a competitive advantage to even make everything. They need to trade. And it's the same in a technology collaboration. There's often an identifiable need. I have one thing, but I don't have something else. And that's a good basis for a deal. So I don't know, Kevin, do you have another question in mind right now? Or I have seen a few other points that really raise the question of urgency And using the same example that you did, Santanu, but COVID, COVID is bringing up questions about, licensing or rights being granted cost-free on an accelerated basis. And this is part of our conversation last year about accelerating patent examination when there's an important public need. I don't know if people have more thoughts on that, how fast track of patents and other, just the urgency needs to, maybe that's a way to stimulate more public funding. Jan, do you have any perspective on that from your economist viewpoint and from more of a pan-European perspective?
Yes, so thanks. I agree that speed is often of essence, especially for small businesses and startups. As a way, there's evidence of that actually. That green startups use accelerated programs more than other types of companies because they need to attract investors, basically. But I would say also that this is typical of startups everywhere. So to me, it's more a business as usual thing. Innovative businesses and startups in particular need speed prosecution, and they need high quality patents to operate well and to draw the best of the patent system. And this is what we aim to do. So at the WIPO, we do not have a specific fast track for green technologies, but we have a base and acceleration program for any technologies that any applicant that wants to use that. And so but I think it's important also, and I fully agree with Cynthia that what is being developed and pushed to the market is not the patent, it's the technology, and patent is one instrument to get there. And it's an important part of the solution, and in particular, if you want to set up collaborations. So the technology is a bigger set of information, the iceberg, and the patent is the top of the iceberg. And if you want to collaborate based on technologies, you need to show more than the patent. You need to share know-how. It's difficult. And the patent does not make it easy, but it makes it possible or less difficult because part of it is both disclosed and protected. And the same applies to international technology transfers. We know it goes via foreign direct investment, it goes via trade, and the better the protection in the recipient country of IP, the more technology content there is in such trade channels. And just to complete also further to Cynthia's point, what is key in the recipient countries is the absorptive capacity. So it's if you show me a very complex patent, I just don't understand it. I'm not able to use it. And it's the same for any type of technology. So education, training, collaboration also in research to have experts locally. This is fundamental to help these countries to best absorb the technologies that is available in the rest of the world. And not all of these technologies is patented, especially in the case of green technologies, solar, wind. Most of it is not protected by IP, and there's a lot of potential for deploying that also. So it's not only about absorbing patented technology, it's absorbing any technologies. That would be, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You actually just caused me to alter a comment I was going to make because we're talking about a patent as a piece of the puzzle. I think it's a piece of a broader set of contributions from parties when they collaborate. But I was going to say it's a necessary piece or necessary but insufficient until you gave your just last example where IP was not for solar and wind maybe necessary, but that technology is more mature. I will say in the early stage technology as a former CEO of a startup that to get that funding in the traditional sense, like Cynthia's used to in California, patents are a necessary element of getting the first capital. And sometimes it's all there is. So, but it's insufficient for sure at commercializing a technology. And a patent sits there on a desk almost, and that's not sufficient. So, but just to assuage the concerns of all our IP lawyers in the audience, I plug that it's necessary. I give patents more props here just because I know that it was essential to getting funding for a company I ran. But there are other cases, and with green tech, there are alternative ways, I think. Sorry for that extended comment. We are getting very close to, if not at the end, but I want to open it up if there's any last comment. Please, everyone, if you're a member of AIPPI, recognize that you can watch this recording. And if you're not, you might want to think about the value of registering with AIPPI so that you could see the recording, and also look out for the other announcements made by Yuki-san and Anya and Jan about their organizations having more material. So if anybody has any other thoughts, I think we're on time to wrap up, but Anya?
Just wanted to add one example, but I think most of it Jan has already answered in terms of how IP, and one example is also through the Brazilian fast track examination system, that it's being used by SMEs who actually want to attract investors through that label that's being awarded if you successfully go through that process. But also that we had an example from an innovator in the Philippines who actually found partners, licensing partners, because of the patent that she thought. So just on that point of how IP can actually facilitate collaboration. But also I like the thought that Santanu introduced about democratization, because I also don't like the notion of that it's the innovators in the rich country and the recipients in the developing countries. But I think that what we need to find is solutions to the problems that we are facing. And sometimes, people are best placed to identify solutions where they occur, where the problems occur. And I think there's a lot of value, and I think there's a lot of value in sort of in that connection, enabling those innovators and facilitating to use IP and other tools in order to bring out these technologies faster and disseminate them more broadly. So that's just my concluding thought.
That's a great point. And just a slight footnote to that too, keep in mind that collaborations using IP often create new IP. And the collaborators should both own that IP unless they don't have very good representation on their side in terms of the agreement. But the agreement will often just provide that there's going to be a jointly created value here, and that will be shared. That may be IP itself in the developing country or in the country where the IP originally is being licensed. So I think this is great if we just keep talking, because I'm enjoying this, but I do think we have reached an end. And Michelle, is there a requirement, or I think I do have to myself move on, but thank you everybody for joining us. And well, we look forward to continuing this conversation and see where we are in the near future. Maybe we'll revisit. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye.
See you.